Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this definitely March day. It's definitely come in like a lion and come out like a lamb, just all in one day. So welcome, everyone. I will put the attendance link in the chat box for you, and we will have our introductions shortly. I just want to have some kind of brief overviews of things in the meantime. And Effie, I saw your name was on this one, but I think that because we're all settling in, I'll just go ahead and lead until we get to the introductions. We do want to have a reminder that I think it's, I don't know if this is from FA for you, that we want to make sure that we want to focus that Tier 1 general ed teachers can do interventions and supportive instruction. And so that's what this is all about. As you can see, we are really focusing on the older readers. This is a quote from Louisa Moats, recognizing that we can teach our older readers those foundational language skills that they might have missed. And they can gain those skills if they have lots of opportunity to apply those skills in meaningful text reading. I would also add meaningful text writing. That's become my new mantra, that teaching reading through writing. The more we write, the more we gain in our reading skills as well as our writing skills. We also have a land acknowledgement from our colleagues at OSPI. And this is held or situated because of the Olympia area where I am and where our OSPI colleagues are. They are the ones who provide the funding for these series. However, I do recognize that people come to us from all over. So I invite you to put in the chat box the traditional lands where you are, if you know that. Where you can see here that in our area, we're on the tribal lands of the Squaxin Island tribe, descendants of the maritime people who lived and prospered along the shores of the southernmost inlets of the Salish Sea for untold centuries. If you don't know the lands on which you are, we have in our resources, which I'll grab for you as well, a link. Where do I have it for all sessions here? I thought we had something about the Native Land CA. Effie, do you, or Nina, do you see it in here? Thought we had something like for all series. We have that. I am misremembering, so my apologies on you. Oh, here it is. Tribal Land Acknowledgement Resource. I'll put that in there.
On November 1st. There you go.
Great, thank you. And thank you for putting that document in. That may not be the Native Land CA one. We'll go get that in the chat box and we'll put that on here for you as well. So these are all the resources that from all of the sessions, including an August session. So if you've missed any, you can always check out some of those resources. Okay. Is there anything either of my colleagues would like to add about our land acknowledgement? Hello, Stephanie.
No, thank you.
I think we're good. We also are recognizing our OSPI partners' equity statement. So I think really for me, it comes down to undoing the last sentence, undoing deficit narratives, policies, and practices, and building our knowledge and leadership for anti-racist policy and implementation. I would add also anti-ableist. And it's really about empowering everyone through equitable access to high quality curriculum instruction and supports. That's why you're here. So thank you. Okay. So we have some Zoom recommendations and requests. So we do ask that you put your name and your district. It's helpful for us, particularly if you are in the same district with anybody else and you want to be put in a breakout room together. It'd be helpful if you put the district name or initials first. That way we know you want to be organized with other people from that same district. So thank you, Stephanie. But if we can change your Zoom name, and if you're not comfortable or know how to do that, oops, let me put in the attendance link. Nina, maybe you can grab the attendance link and put that in. So to change your Zoom name, you go to the participants list, you find your name, and next to that you see more, and that's where you can rename and put your district before or after your name. We also do encourage people to be active participants, and hence the Zoom option for muting and videoing, so we can see each other and we can have more of a realistic experience. But we also understand if your video isn't working, or if there are distractions, or if there are connectivity issues, that's fine too. The raising hand, it used to be under reactions, but I think it's now on the toolbar, so I can fix that next time. Because unless you're Stephanie, if you do this, I can't see you. So using your electronic hand would be great. And then of course there will be opportunities to annotate on the screen. You can access annotations by going to the view options at the top where it says you're viewing my screen, and it will pull up this toolbar where you can, what it's pointing to right now will change the color of what you're writing with. And then there are stamps here under the check mark. Okay, if there's anything I'm missing, please let me know. In which case, I'm just going to move forward quickly so we can get to the content. Our guideposts, these are just kind of cues and reminders for us. And I think you already put the resources in, right, Nina? I'll put those in again. So handouts are ADA accessible that you can print. Engagement opportunities, things to do, time to reflect. Obviously, you could see, you can read these, but the icons are helpful for us when we see them later, that it's a reminder for us. And sometimes a practical strategy, something you can walk away and do with your kids, that these are reminders that help our kids know what to expect. And they also help keep us on track. So I really like to have an icon and a cue with that. These are the requests for how we work together. And they are requests that I feel like these are useful for us in order to get the most out of things. So notice we have both listening and sharing, because we can't learn from each other if we don't speak. Like I can't learn from you and what all the things you have to bring to the table unless you're sharing. And so it goes both ways. Listening and sharing, I think, are really important. As well as to give ourselves and each other grace. I'll just pause for a moment and see if there are any that you are particularly connecting to today, or if there are any things that you think we're missing from this list. You can add it into the chat or put a stamp on it with your annotations. I'll have to color these for next time. There we go. If my pauses aren't long enough, feel free to let me know. But if I sometimes see that nothing's coming in, you can always send things in that area. Okay. We do know that many of us have been with us before, but we do have at least one new person. So we'll just do a brief introductions. I'm actually going to go first since I'm talking, then I'll pass it to Effie and then to Nina, who will be doing our activity on the next slide. So I'm the one in the middle, obviously. And I have been teaching kids with dyslexia since 2001. Although of course it turned into teaching teachers, both pre-service teachers and then people who are already teachers. However, I taught elementary, then middle, then high, and that was really my jam. I love the high schoolers, especially freshmen and seniors. You gotta have that freshman and senior split. So although I was a special ed teacher, I definitely have seen and collaborated with a lot of my gen ed teachers. And I think that really is the most important piece that we do, is that collaboration. Effie, I'm going to pass it to you, and then Nina.
Okay. I am down in the corner. That is my now senior in high school daughter, and we are in Vancouver, Washington. I am the regional literacy coordinator in Vancouver, Washington at ESD 112. Prior to that, I spent about 14 years with Vancouver Public Schools as a classroom teacher, literacy coach, multilingual coach, RTI coach, variety of positions. And about 10 years ago, went to the ESD and work on a variety of projects, served on the Dyslexia Council with Alicia, and work on a lot of statewide initiatives with the other ESDs, and work closely with the districts with equity projects and multilingual and Title I. So a lot of good stuff. So Nina?
Hi, thanks, Effie. Hi, everybody. I'm Nina Sotomayor Andrew. I've been working with the state of Washington and a lot of ESDs and districts here since 2014. Prior to that, mainly around literacy, best practices, and supporting reading instruction on the secondary level. I started out my career as a teacher in middle school intensive reading plus classes where we taught both English and reading to our students. So I've worked anywhere from 6th grade up until 11th grade in the teaching environment, and then later on as an instructional literacy coach at the high school, district, and now state level. So I have a lot of experience with working with students at the secondary level, and it's just kind of my passion. So I'm really excited to be engaging with you all today. All right, we're just going to do a little entry activity where we're going to take a look at an image, and I'd just like to invite you to choose which medieval cat are you feeling like today. Feel free to put your choice number in the chat, and you can even share out why if you'd like to.
Or we can annotate.
Oh, annotating is also fun. You can feel free to add a heart or star on any of the images that speak to you.
I like how someone's put number 9. It's like, oof. But that cat just says to me, oof. I think
The
I'm
relaxing cat.
engaging a lot. We have a number 7.
Oh.
I think Abigail said she's juggling all her kids, so I get it.
Yes. I see number 3. Someone's feeling like the cat in number 3. Number 1.
Cameron, I would love to that's an interesting cat, number 1, isn't it? Feeling for others like that, Krista.
Oh, he does have that like sweet kind of thinking, empathetic face. I see that now.
I love number 4. It's like, am I holding this for someone else, or am I just kind of saying, nope, you're not moving? Someone says 6, longing for spring break. It's just a few more days for everyone. If next week's your break.
Whoever picked number 5, I'm feeling you on that one. That was the one I picked too.
So yeah, Nina, I'm one with 5. I feel like that one's almost like I'm thinking about the cats here and the scratching, like the scratching pose.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yes. I was thinking like stretching, like, oh, I'm ready for my stretch break. Well, thank you, everybody. Oh,
I
did
was gonna
someone
say
want to
we
share
do this
out?
to get into our right brain a little bit before we get started. So because we do so much of our left-hand brain, our language brain. Let's get into our creative side for a moment. And feel free if you want to add in something else in the chat. We appreciate it. Nina, if you want to talk about this, I'll demonstrate the Jamboard too.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we're going to be going in and utilizing a Jamboard today. So if you guys wouldn't mind, we're going to go ahead and access the Jamboard. And let me see here if I can add that link into the chat for you. And on frame 3, oh, you did. Perfect. On the first couple frames, you're just going to see our title for today. The next one is a parking lot frame. So if you have any questions or wonderings as we go through our work today, feel free to walk into the Jamboard and add a sticky note to the parking lot. And those sticky notes are on the left-hand side. You can type on it and then hit save, and then you can drag it anywhere you would like to add it to. You can also change the color of your sticky note once you're in that as well. Thank you, Alicia, for, yes, blue. I always pick pink, but I think blue is such a calming color. And then on frame 3, if you guys wouldn't mind grabbing a sticky note and adding your name, role, grade, and content area. And you can just go ahead and put yourself on the map where you are located. For example, mine says Nina, it's pink, and it's hovering over ESD 114. I see Stephanie already added her sticky note on the side. So we'll give you guys a moment to go ahead and add your information.
Someone says Jamboard always freaks out on my phone. I get it. You can either put it onto Jamboard or
Mm.
chat box. It's just a way for us to join in with each other. Thank you for
Yeah,
joining.
if you
Love it. I'll put you down a
if
little
you
bit.
add it to the chat, one of us can definitely add it for you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Abby.
All right, as well, people are taking a moment to share where they're joining us from. We do have some intro to the series. We can see that we are almost to the end. And it's funny with the last one, tools for strategies, we hope to incorporate those all along. But at the same time, it's kind of our what haven't we gotten to yet? And I think that we're probably going to be doing some more focus on writing. But that'll be kind of our what haven't we focused on that we want to make sure we get to? And so that's also an opportunity if there's something that you feel like we haven't focused on enough that you'd like to make sure that we get to, please let us know and we'll put it in. Clear all those off. All right, so today's focus, we're going to have a review, reflect, and connection. And last time we talked about implementation, we talked about syntax and that reading, writing connection a bit. We started with that. And I want to give you an opportunity to talk about how things gone. What have you learned? What have you thought about in the last month that, since we've met before? Or actually, it's just been a month. It feels like longer, doesn't it? It's been a long month, everyone. Then we'll have some opportunity for new learning. In this case, as you can see, we'll be talking about choosing texts for instructional equity. And then we'll be doing some opportunity for practice talking and reflection. And we'll be talking then about closure and next steps. So without further ado, I'm going to start us off with some review of what we talked about last time when we talked about syntax. And syntax is a piece that, as I work on grappling with more and more on the construction of words and sentences when I'm making, talking about writing, and the understanding of them when I'm talking about reading, I feel like syntax is really the glue that brings these pieces together. So we started with a definitional slide here talking about how when we're talking about syntax, we're talking about how words, phrases, clauses, and sentences, they work together to create meaning. So that if I have just random words, they have meaning in themselves. If I say, for example, cat, but if I say the beautiful cat, that tells me something that makes it a different kind of meaning. And if I say the large wild cat versus the small house cat, those are two very different, meanings of cat. So cat itself can mean very different things. And in that phrase, what does it mean in relationship to the rest of the context? And when I think about syntax, I think about questions about texts. And so those phrases can tell me where the cat is. They can tell me when the cat did something. It could tell me how the cat's doing, or how much of the cat of its time is being spent doing that. And so, of course, the cat would be your do or what, your who or what of the sentence, and then what did it do? What was it doing? Tell me about that cat. Which one? What kind? What many? So these rules of content and function words. What I mean by content and function are those content words are words like cat and jump, and those action words, your nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs that really are easy to define. And your function words are more of your glue words like conjunctions, articles, prepositions that are really hard to define, but they're really key because they hold things together. We can't just say, when you're talking about the book being on the table, you can't just say the table, the table. That makes no sense because on is very different from under, which is different from around. And so those are all key pieces of how those function words help us understand phrases. If I go too quickly, feel free to pause and help me say, well, hold on, I wasn't there last time. Can you just give me a moment to take a screenshot? But we want to get through some of these reminders and reflection things for you to have an opportunity to talk. You talking is better than us talking. Just because you've got to process, and remember, you verbalize to internalize and you write to remember. So moving on, we did talk about, again, that role of syntax when it comes to bridging between individual words and larger texts. So thinking about how we read fluently, we talked about the fact that, remember, you need to get the words right first. That's that word accuracy. And actually, I think I might have changed this on another slide somewhere to where word reading accuracy and word reading automaticity. But the same thing is true. I mean, we're talking about reading fluency. If you want to talk about writing fluency, it's the same thing. You've got to get it right first, get some automaticity with it, and then connect it into those larger chunks. In this case, with phrases. So you say the accuracy first, automaticity, and then we see how those words work together in a phrase or a clause, which we know a clause is a sentence, and then how complex are those sentences, and helping our kids deconstruct sentences into their individual phrases so they can understand the meaning. And that way then they're pausing as they read for expression, and it's helping them unlock those connections between where something is, what it's doing, and all those different elements of the sentence. So and then, of course, the next piece would be that they can see how these phrases and sentences cohere together. And we think about transitions and how after or therefore, how those transition words help put it beyond those individual phrases and clauses to the whole unit of text. We talked about, and I'll share this link from a handout from William Van Cleve and his work on skill development. And what I like about this one is it helps us see that there are different stages. At first we understand it, then we can recognize it, then we can create it in isolation, and then we can create it in application. We can use this new knowledge. And so I love this is for writing, where we start with being able to generate ideas first. And then we look at those roles that words play. That's that part of speech. And then we put these pieces of sentences together and to larger units of the essay or the paragraph. And of course, it's really, when we're talking about our kids in secondary, we want to be able to create essays, paragraphs, responses, all our writing based on using content-based topics and independently. So that's our goal with that. Excuse me, I'm going to shut the door. Give you a moment with that to look at it. Okay. Everybody's feeling like, whew, we got a lot there, but it's an interesting matrix of the ways to get to expression, which then benefits our reception as well in the reading. So what can we do? We did talk about this a little bit last time when we talked about writing. What can we do to help our kids read through writing? One, let's have them write about what they've read. Whether it be personal responses, how does it feel? How did it make them emote? How did they connect to something in their life? So this is that connection that they make to the things that they're reading about. They can summarize it. They can make notes about it. They can write questions or they can answer questions. And then, of course, teaching the writing skills and increasing how much students write. When we talk about increasing, and here are some tips on teaching writing skills, the processes, the construction skills, spelling skills. I can't stress enough, I was going to say one of the things we can get so much bang from our buck is sentence combination practice. As a special educator, we always assessed kids' sentence combination skills, but we never really taught it. And so it's kind of like we hear with spelling. When I was a high school teacher and I was also working on my doctorate, and I asked my colleagues, do you teach spelling? And nobody said yes, my gen ed colleagues. Do you take off for spelling? And they said yes. So I kind of scratched my head. Thank you, Stephanie. I thought, so you're grading on something you're not teaching. So, but nonetheless, the more we all focus on helping our students recognize, if they're struggling with it, let's pay attention to that. But of course, those processes are really crucial as well. Like what is the structure? How do I construct a sentence? How do I construct a paragraph? And so often I feel like we assume that kids can do this by secondary time, and they still might need our help. So let's continue. Thank you, Stephanie, for the reaction on that too. Okay.
So, Alicia,
I
just want to make a little plug here again for just this last Monday. I think I'm on like chapter 9 and 10, I think it was, of a book study for the writing rope. And the group I was with, it was about the phrasing, and combining phrases, combining sentences to make better sentences. And we talked about it, and the group ranged from like middle school teachers to first grade teacher, and we talked about the different ways that they could do this at all levels, with sentence strips, with note cards, with strips of paper, with partnering, with just all the different ways of getting kids to actively do that type of interactive writing and creating. And then we talked about the old days of sentence diagramming, and if anybody had been doing any of that recently, or if any curriculums had any types of that, and then how we can utilize some of the things we know from GLAD with identifying adverbs and how we can kind of build on some of those pieces to integrate it into that. But definitely that book, there are some, and then synthesizing into writing summaries, there are some really, really good, I know the middle school teacher was really excited about the next week after spring break. She was coming back and able to utilize some of the graphic organizers that were in there for the work they were going to be doing on writing summaries.
Thank you, Effie. I totally appreciate that. So I don't know if everyone noticed, or you did I held up the book she was talking about as the writing rope.
And I can put it in the chat.
And the book that I was referring to, William Van Cleves, is around here somewhere. He will not be updating because he has unfortunately passed, but it is one of my favorite books, and it's around here somewhere. I'll find the link to that as well for us. We talked about, go ahead. Did I hear something? Hi, Melissa. We talked, I think that Effie added this in, cognitive resources needed for writing. And I just think this is so crucial. Keep in mind the complexity that, yes, it is the expressive skill that is kind of the opposite of reading, but it takes so much more than just speaking, because when I'm speaking, I can just kind of rattle it off, and we say how often we say I just kind of verbally just kind of keep going. And I don't necessarily have to organize my thoughts as they come out of my mouth. I try, it's always useful if I do, right? But take a look at some of these pieces that, okay, if I'm a public speaker, yes, I'm going to want to know my knowledge of my audience and my writing environment, but their affective writing needs. What do I need to be able to be comfortable with this? I have to write things down. I have to think about the right words to use. And of course, we talked about the oral language as well. Sentences and grammar and process. I have to be able to read because that's helpful with this, and understand the genre and goal and content. There's a lot going on here as I'm reading and writing. And of course, when we go back to that oral language, is that if I can't tell a story, I can't write a story. So we've got to help our students with the oral first so we can get to that. And we also had one last piece, was multilingual connections. And this was talking about language transfer. And this is helping our kids transfer that, apply the linguistic features from one language to another by a multilingual speaker or a bilingual, someone who has an additional language. And this can be helpful and it can be not helpful. And so you talk about how those translation problems in their speech, maybe because of structural differences and how in English, we are what's called an SVO, subject verb object order. Not all languages follow that same pattern. There may be cultural differences on how we organize our speech and therefore our writing. We have compound verbs. There's verbs made up of two words. I think about how many phrasal verbs we have in English, like to turn off the light. It's not a prepositional phrase, off the light, because you're not turning something that is off the night. Turn off is your verb. what are you turning off? You're turning off the light. That's really complicated for a second language learner. And missing terms, we always will leave things out. We assume things, and some languages do that more than others and cultures. And of course, several meanings. English has multiple words. I mean, we have a lot of words with several meanings. And so there's a lot more that can be brought to this table, and it can be challenging as we are learning a new language. Effie has this example of, in Greek, I can't, did you say it's pronounced spitimu?
Speedy Moo. So my house is translated, and I should probably add to this, is translated to Speedy Moo, which Speedy is house. So you're really saying house my is what I should add to the comment there, is instead of my house. So that noun is reversed. And last night I was able to attend a documentary on translators and about children who are put in the position of translating for families, and the challenges that they encounter in those. And when we talk about technical languages, and the children are ending up, having to translate legal documents, medical information at 6, 7, 8, 11 years old, and trying to make sense of words and the transfer of things like that. And so it becomes very complex in some situations for them. So being very cognizant and sensitive to, and there was a panel of speakers for students from the high school here that my daughter goes to, in talking about their experiences with that. Yes, it's a documentary. US Bank funded it. They did a showing in Vancouver last night. I will find the link and put it in there. It's pretty amazing. They're showing it, I think, around the country. So let me find that for you.
Thanks, Effie. And as you do that, I'm going to give us an opportunity to give you some time to connect and discuss some of these writing structures, thinking about grammar and syntax. We have usually been doing about 10 minutes. So we want to make sure you have enough time to chat with this. Your rooms, I did have one room because I put all the VPS in one room together. But then I realized that some of you are from Heights and some of you aren't. So I split that, so it's not 7, and I split it into 3 and 4. If you want to be all together, let me know and I can re-put you back together. Hopefully our rooms will be large enough, but with such small rooms, maybe we'll do 9 minutes. What do my colleagues think? 10? 9 or 10? Okay. I'll do 9 and then you'll get an extra minute when I close things off. So I'm going to put, we had 3 rooms. Who would like to start sharing?
I'll speak for Heights. I was elected.
Thanks, Tessa.
I usually don't talk, so it's my turn. But so I was just talking about I teach science, and so one of the activities that we did recently is they worked in groups and they created roller coasters, and they went through and they labeled using different vocabulary words pictures of the roller coasters that they created. And then I had them do a reflection part on the assessment where they talked about how they worked together in a group and things like that. And I put 4 sentence starters for each reflection question. And it did help them to write better reflections. But the thing that I noticed, and I'm just gonna, I don't know if it's totally pertinent to this group, but I'm gonna say it just in case somebody else makes the same mistake, is I had the questions, and then at the end of the questions page, I had the sentence starters, and the kids, it was so confusing for them. So like the next time I do it, I'll have the question and then the sentence starters right underneath. Feels silly now to think that I didn't do that. And after noticing, how they struggled with it, but yeah, so that's what I.
When we learn from, when we know better, we do better, right?
Yep.
So thanks, Tess, for sharing. That's one way to bring in the writing and give them some grammatical supports too. It's one thing that William Van Cleef, I went and got the book while you were in breakout rooms. He has a lot of stems that he'll start with. He'll say, here's a subject, you provide the predicate, or here's a predicate, what subject would go with it? And so those stems are a great way to start with that. Stephanie, I saw you writing. Let me put that back up for you.
Yeah, thanks. Who is it by? I'm sorry.
This is William Van Cleve,
Okay, thank you.
who worked with, learned from Diana Hanbury King, who started the Kildonan School back east, which I'm not sure if it's still there.
Okay. I was just gonna say, I really appreciate Tessa as a science teacher being here, because I'm a resource room teacher, and kind of makes sense. I teach ELA, blah, blah, blah. But to have a science teacher here just means so much, because, oh my goodness, I have to work with science teachers and everything else. So thank you so much for being here.
Second that. Thank you. Would there someone from another group like to share? I say, Stephanie, since you were unmuted, if you'd like to say something that came up in your room.
Oh.
I know you weren't in the same room as Tessa.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we were all like, a lot of us were first timers or second timers and missed the last session, blah, blah, blah. So we were just talking about just different things that you could use in general, to help with the syntax, text structures, things like that. And we were just talking about how we like to use speech to text, diction on Microsoft, things like that, to help the kids out, and how reticent some were using it. They just were like, no, because I teach middle schoolers, and another person in our group did. And so it's kind of interesting that sometimes, unfortunately, you can give them all the tools and things that you want, but they refuse to use it. That can be frustrating.
That's very, very true. As you spoke, I also thought about a training I did last week and the week before with, let's see if I can make a thought bubble here. It was a Wired for Reading training. And while I only did the initial, I didn't do the advanced, they did make reference to what they call the muse and the editor. Oh, those aren't staying. Let me do this way and maybe make it a little bit thicker. So if we have the muse on one hand and the editor on the other, I'll make this an M here. And when you say speech to text, that's the muse. Let's get those ideas out. And then the editor can come out and say, all right, let's think about order and spelling and grammar and all that. But let's get all of those ideas out first. And let's not think about, let's separate these two processes so our kids can just get their thoughts out and get some things going without having to worry about whether or not the spelling's correct or whether or not their grammar's correct or punctuation and all those other pieces. So I like this idea of just separating out the muse and the editor. I'll clear that up. All right, anybody else with anything to add? All right, it is 4:21, so we're going to jump to Effie. And Effie, do you want to share screen or do you want me to just drive for you?
Drive for me.
Okay.
And I am going to try to find my screen over here again, because I seem to keep losing that. I get excited and then I look for something and then there it is. Okay. So just for the note, I mentioned that translator, and I put the link in the chat, and while you all were in your breakouts, I checked and it looks like the trailer and the full documentary, which is only about 20 minutes, are available online. So you can watch it and you can see all the awards it has won, and take a look and see, and message me if you want to talk more about it or think about it. And beyond the scope of this, I plan to do some more work and sharing with it regionally at least, and thinking about that, but I did want to let you know that I did take a look at that, and it does look like it's fully accessible online. Okay, so I'm gonna get here. So shifting, thinking about text. And a while ago, and I chose to take this section of the work today because my team with the other coordinators across the state a couple of years ago, we kind of compiled some of this information and talked quite extensively with our ELA fellows, with our teacher leadership network, in thinking about these shifts and thinking about building that repertoire of access of sources. So they're not just, text in the traditional sense, but where am I getting the resources, and how am I building rich text sets, and how am I building in other avenues of information that expand, a UDL type of resource for my classroom, and thinking about that. So building comprehension by engaging all students in discussion of complex, knowledge-rich text sets. And so we're going to think about text in the broader sense. So common misconceptions. Comprehension instruction is about the strategy we're practicing, not the particular text we're reading. So I want you to read that again. Comprehension instruction is about the strategy we're practicing, not the text we're reading. Choosing books with diverse characters and authors makes literacy instruction culturally responsive. We teach the reader, not the text.
I'm going to draw a line around this misconceptions.
Yeah.
I think that's crucial to remember, that these are things we are moving away from.
We're moving away from. We teach the reader, not the text. Teaching comprehension strategy leads to reading comprehension. So if we just teach the strategies, people will be able to learn how to comprehend the text. But every text is so different, and every reader comes to the text that they read with different knowledge and information. Just because I have really good strategies at reading one type of text, I might read another text that I'm not so proficient at. So reading. Students should work on comprehension and text at their instructional level.
Anything you want to say about those?
How do we feel about that?
Yeah.
I see Stephanie shaking her head. What kind of level do we think we should be working at? So I want you to kind of ponder these. Think about these.
Oh, do you want, can I comment? Is there
Yeah,
something?
go for it.
Yeah.
So, what I have found is if you find a story, a text, whatever, that's super engaging, they will read way above their level sometimes. It is amazing. Like Twilight or Harry Potter or, something like that. Now, granted, I do read aloud a lot, and my instruction is based on that a lot, but still it's amazing what they can do if they're really engaged.
I would be, yeah. And where I think we have to be careful is where we set kids loose as independent readers for a, like, oh, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to independently read this book. And I have to be confident that they can read it independently and be successful reading it. So we might need some scaffolding and support too. But if we're going to work on comprehension at a higher level, that's including close reading strategies with teachers providing instructional support and making sure they understand what they're reading. But we can work on comprehension at levels above what they're doing with that support. And I think that when all the close reading strategies came out, people got really excited about it, and then it kind of got pushed to the side. And I think, you know, bringing that back and getting that excitement about, you know, we saw videos of, there's a video out there of like these first and second graders reading this passage with their teacher about a heart transplant. And it's way above their level of reading, but they're able to understand it because the teacher provides the background knowledge and builds the vocabulary alongside with them. And they're very successful doing that. But she didn't send them on their own with that passage and say, go read this and come back to me and tell me about it. So just kind of thinking about some of these misconceptions. And just because we picked books with diverse characters doesn't mean it's a authentic, culturally diverse book. We've heard horror stories about books with pictures of children baking a cake for George Washington and all happy little African-American kids on the front of the cover, and they're actually, you know, not so happy baking that cake. And so we have to be kind of careful with some of that. So make sure they're vetted.
Right?
Properly.
Yeah.
I remember Era telling us that story. What?
So there's so much more involved, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, like text choices for universal design. So what I just was saying, like thinking about the different parts of the brain and what parts are involved here in engagement. So thinking about how we self-regulate, and there's a link there for reference. Then and that how creating a sustaining effort and persistence in this self-regulation. And this is so interesting because it just all these different areas, and we get to the last one. I want to mention something from previously, and then building that interest in, and that we were just talking about, you know, if there's a high interest in something, we all as learners are going to push ourselves and expand that representation, and with how we process and learn with comprehension, that language and expression and all of those pieces that are built into that. And I am not deep in expertise in this area. My colleague from my IPP world is my expertise go-to in this area, and the perception. But just from what I've been able to learn and participate in all these different little areas. But the one that, you know, the action and expression and thinking about the executive functions, this is where I've been really focusing on the most. And with what we were talking about earlier, when Alicia was talking about the writing, and she was talking about if you can't tell a story, how are you going to be able to write the story? And what's been happening with some writing training I've been participating in this is thinking about the executive function of the writing process for students, and how we, you know, so simply would say, hey, let's write a story about a time I was at a birthday party. And that's a retrieval of information, and we have to retrieve it. We have to think, you know, think about it. We have to process it, take the emotions around it, put it into writing. And it's much more complex than it really sounds. And putting it all, and there's an executive function and a really steps to all of that piece. And if we can break it in, so we've talked about something called kernel essays, and breaking things into small pieces. I can't remember if we talked about kernel essays in here, but we've
We'll add it
talked
to
about
May.
that. Okay, we talked about that in our fellows program with kernel essays, and it's just a small chunk, breaking things into a small chunks. So and giving people that that sense of agency, and choosing the scaffold and who has the voice, who's the learner, who's providing that choice, to make those decisions.
Choice is so crucial. So speaking of choice,
Speaking of choice, text choices. So thinking about, what are students expected to study and know, and what are they expected to learn? You know, my fondest memories of school are when I was provided choice. When teachers at the middle school and in elementary school specifically provided a menu of options, and they would say, you can write a paper, you can do a presentation, you can create a model, you can do a combination of these. And it was specifically social studies that I was provided these choices. And so I really reflect on that, and those have really stood out over the years, of what kind of choices and differentiation was it provided, what students are expected to learn and study, and how am I able to process and learn that information. So how students are able to learn and interact, what kind of environment, hold on just a moment.
as we all said, we give each other and ourselves grace, don't we?
We like to chew on paper, and then we choke as a medium-sized dog. Sorry. How students learn and are taught. And then thinking about how that demonstrates that learning. Again, that menu of options. What do you produce? And, and then how you use our space and how it all pulls together. And what this also reminds me of, what does this remind me of? What does it remind me of? It reminds me of project-based learning. It reminds me of the process being the most important part, and not the product being the most important part. And that it all, if you're a really good project-based learning, is the outcome is the element of the whole process, and the content is the standards. And if it's put together well, you have a lot of differentiation and choice in there. And so thinking about your text choices as part of that, I got deeper into it because I got excited about the whole PBL piece. But when you think about how you're going to integrate your text into that, we got to participate in this. Well, you were there, Alicia, the mushroom piece a couple of weeks ago, and it was a science integration lesson about mushrooms, and it started with a poem, and then it had a video, and then it had other books brought in, and then there were mushrooms, and it was just this whole integration, science integration experience modeled, and thinking about how you could pull different types of text in there. Was it outdoor school training, Tessa? It was something from the state for the integration that Kimberly Astle had put together.
Alyssa and I went to it last year.
Okay, yeah, somebody from 113, ESD 113, they did it for our team, and a couple weeks ago. It was fun. I don't like to get my hands dirty, so it was like grocery store science for me, Tessa. It was good. You know me. Okay, let's keep going here. So thinking about, somebody was just asking me if there was any trainings out there on differentiation the other day. Differentiation is a pathway for ensuring success with standards at the core of effective planning, teaching up high expectations and high achievement for every standard. That word has been around for so long, and thinking about, sometimes it's overdone. It's one of those words that kind of goes in one ear and out the other, but thinking about differentiation. And if we think about it and we apply it to MTSS and we think about, here I am with my life in a Venn diagram, and I'm going to take my differentiation and how do I apply that to thinking about MTSS and what am I doing to meet the needs at a tier 1, and then moving it into an intervention potentially if I need to, out of differentiation, what am I doing specifically based on data from my differentiation into intervention at a tier 2. So we have differentiation, and differentiation, it's a funny thing because you really start thinking about it, you do quite a bit of it just naturally in the classroom. And so, yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. I'm just going to bring all this up at once. There we go.
What is a linked text set? So, linked being, joined, just in the basic tense. It can be organized by topic, theme, essential, or compelling question, consists of multimodal text, and then all those things listed there. So it doesn't have to be just a text, like I said, in the sense of text. We're using that term broadly as in a source. So maybe it should be linked sources.
I thought about that with the mushroom example and how many different ways you were engaging with mushroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead and talk about this equity lens. I think this is a really important one too, as we think about what texts to use.
And there's all kinds of guidelines out there now. There's more than there were, and that you can ask these questions. Whose story, like it says, whose story is being told, and whose story is. But yeah, that's a bigger question. Whose story is not being told, and what voices and perspectives are we seeing, hearing? Who is telling the perspective? That's interesting. So I don't want to get off on a tangent because I will go down this rabbit hole and you will not get me out of it. But last week I spent 2 days at Microsoft in AI training, and I'm becoming a little obsessed. And so you can ask it to put things in different perspectives for you. And so while you can ask it, write this from the perspective of, adjust this so that this perspective shows me blank. And so that is an area here that I could be like, here's a text I could give it, and I bet I could ask it, now tell me this from the opposite perspective, and it'll do it for me. So there is a lot to be thought about from different perspectives with this. Yes, Tessa, I'm hiring a new secretary. I just put the job description in there, and I was like, give me better questions for the job interview. Yesterday I had somebody that told me they were afraid of all the robots conquering the world. And now she's doing a presentation to her principal about how to use it for PLCs. It sorted questions for me the other day using Bloom's taxonomy. We have, and here's a little plug, we're going to have modules rolled out across the state that everybody will have opportunities to be trained in coming up soon, since this was a statewide training for the ESDs. So yeah, my filter right now is, how can AI help me? And how can AI help you?
I should make a Venn diagram again for you.
Yeah, that AI is gonna.
There we go.
There it is. So here it is. So thinking about these linked tests, and this is fun because like a lot of us got into teaching because we had fun when we were young with thematic lessons that our teachers did for us. We had that. So I said, like, social studies. When I was in 5th and 6th grade, Martin Luther King Elementary here in Vancouver, Washington, my teachers did these social studies thematic units that were incredible. And so we had things like, so we get in and we get to it and I'm like, you know, oh, I've got curriculum and I'm locked up, I'm doing this and this. And so here now, again, I start to bring in, you know, things from the National Archives, and I'm bringing in the open source documents that are out there, and you're bringing in audios, and you're bringing in, you know, authentic photographs like we see here. You're bringing in, you know, picture books, and you're taking that time, and you can do close readings of photographs to teach kids how to do a close reading of a text, and you're reading short texts that are engaging and getting them to talk and think, and then the poetry, and then and music. So thinking about all of these coming together and building that, and you get, you know, the ability to, excuse me, pull these beautiful pieces of authentic text and visuals together. And I think it's is it the National Archives that actually has all those amazing resources? Also the Getty Museum has amazing teacher resources that are all free. A lot of the museums have really great free open source items.
I was gonna say, Effie, too, the Smithsonian Learning Lab too.
Yeah.
They are really good for free things too for teachers.
Yeah, those are the early things that I used before there were so many other things out there, were the, like, Smithsonian, the Getty, the National Archives, those sources. So play with those.
Another one I like is AmericansWhoTellTheTruth.org.
Oh,
There are beautiful paintings of people like Amy Goodman. I can't remember how many, you know, all the people who were on there. And and on the painting it has quotes, and then you can learn more about each of these people. And so AmericansWhoTellTheTruth.org was a really beautiful one as well. But Effie, when I think about this and I think about what you said about AI, what troubles me is when you said they could give you, for example, a different perspective. How authentic is that to, I mean, I want to hear authentic voices and authentic, you know, people sharing their perspective, not a computer generated perspective that may or may not be authentic.
well, it's pulling it from different, you know, perspectives within the AI world, but that is also then for a human to check and see. So, but I can, like, look at it and say, you know, give it to me from the perspective of a chef working in a kitchen in the, you know, 1500s or whatever. And then I could go through and care. It's just something that one of the teachers yesterday was comparing it was about space, walking on the moon, and it was a narrative story and a nonfiction, and they asked it to kind of generate a third option, because the first two had been kind of, you know, they've been using them and they were getting kind of dull, and they wanted a third option about something on the moon and from a different perspective. And so yeah, you do have to be careful with some of that stuff, but, or you can ask for do it in a different, like, voice or tone with that. But
Thank you, Effie.
Yeah.
Well, Nina's going to lead us in
Okay.
practice time. So Nina, I'll go ahead and put this up for you.
One more thing about AI, the worst, what's been sticking with me, the worst AI you're ever going to use is the AI you use today. Tomorrow it'll be better.
Good to know.
Like 5 seconds later. Thanks, Effie. I appreciate you sharing all of that. And I think it is important for us to like think of different ways to access that new learning and then maybe how we can provide those resources to our students. So I appreciate you going through that with us. We're going to have some time here to go into some practice for a little bit. So before we do so, I just want to share with you a couple things. And this first item comes from the Common Core. And so when we're thinking about our students, this here is an example of what they call a portrait of a student who meets the standards that have been set out for the Common Core. And so we went ahead and we underlined some of the key features, I guess you want to call, or indicators of students who are exhibiting college and career readiness around reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language. So we want them to be able to demonstrate independence. And we want them to be able to, without too much scaffolding at this point, evaluate complex text and really kind of delve into comprehension. That doesn't mean we don't build them up to that by utilizing supports along the way. But by the time we're, graduating them off into the world, we want them to be able to feel comfortable with doing that. We want them to have a strong content knowledge and have had an opportunity to really establish that. We want them to be able to respond to varying demands of audience, task, purpose, and disciplines. So giving students different methods and modes for ways that they're going to respond to tasks or consider a topic or a question. We want students to be very good at comprehension. Oh, and I see Alicia's adding, that's where we've got our opportunities for differentiation, right? So we want to give them, and this is where UDL comes in. So we give different ways to address how we're going to answer a question, maybe how we're going to even access a task, some even having students space in the classroom. So maybe some students prefer to stand when they're taking notes versus sitting. Little things like that can also be addressed and thought about when we're working with students around this kind of stuff. We also want our students to really value evidence-based responses. So we want students to feel comfortable with going back into text or going into doing some research, going and pulling references for when they're providing responses or supporting any of the claims that they've now created as they've been going through their learning. Much like Effie shared earlier, we want our students to feel comfortable with technology use as well as digital media. And it's always changing. So as educators, we have to kind of evolve with that. And I always invite my students to be the experts in that field. So as I'm learning to share with them, I want them to share with me some of their learning. And so like even the perspective predicament that we just talked about with AI, I would almost generate one and provide it to students and give me reasons why this perspective would work and why not. And we're going through a process of like discussing and analyzing and all of that. And I don't know what the answer is, but them going through that process is the work. So that's like an opportunity to do that. And then the last thing we want to look at is they come to understand other perspectives and cultures. And by saying that, we also need to address the fact that we haven't been hitting all of our cultures and perspectives. So we want our students to have exposure or even understand places that they can research for additional exposure. So maybe we don't have all of the resources in the class to touch, but we provide them places they can go to be able to find those resources. And then we teach them how to judge whether a resource is valid. Is it something that we're going to use to support our claims or whatever it is that we're working on? So, and I love the last piece of developing empathy, right? So we want our students to really kind of put themselves in somebody else's shoes and kind of walk along a path with them. So we're going to also, oh, and I think, did you add the link for this in the chat?
did.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And I just, that last one, as you were talking about, it also makes me think of the concepts of mirrors and windows. You see yourself and you see others through what you're reading.
Perfect. And then, so this is just, oh, go ahead.
I just said, I don't have a link for this.
Oh, no, and you guys, this is all of those underlined components. These are those ELA practices, habits of mind. So they've all been kind of put here for you in a nice little organized way. And it's just a way to and this is something you could even have up in a classroom or up next to you as like a reminder of like, this is what we think as we're doing these things, and this is what we want to be able to accomplish as we're going through our work in ELA as students and teachers. So for our practice, we invite you guys to think about a lesson or activity that you've done or are planning to do through the lens of differentiation, maybe utilizing some of those universal design for learning supports, or we even talked a little bit about project-based learning and text choices. And then independently reflect on your practice and examples of when you explicitly addressed these habits of mind. And again, the link that we shared has all of those on there. They're the bolded components. And then in your breakout room, if you wouldn't mind sharing how some of these practices are exemplified in your instruction. So we'll probably do about 10 minutes in the breakout.
It's so funny. I was about to say we don't have 10 minutes, and I'm like, oh wait, we go till 5:30, not 5 o'clock. I've been
Oh,
stuck
okay.
on time.
I was gauging your face. You're like,
I know.
"Ah."
Because a couple of people have said had to leave, and they've sent
Oh.
me private messages saying, I really like this. I'm so sorry I'm double booked. And so we will have some more time to talk. Yes, we can do 10 minutes with that. We will have small groups. I did want to take you to the Jamboard, though, as you can see that after slide 4, which is our structured literacy overview, that on slide 5 is a picture of what Nina was showing from the Common Core and the summary here. And you can even use this as a checklist if you want to think about it that way with your little check mark thing. And if you want to make your own, let me go back to, oh, here's the eraser. Here's also the undo button. So if you want to make your own Jamboard for your group so that not everyone's sharing it, you can go up here to these 3 dots under more actions, and you can make a copy of that. And then there are also places for common takeaways or things that you want to just take with you. And we'll always revisit our parking lot as well. Okay, so I'm going to give us time for practice and discussion. So let me pull that up for you. And we will put in, she said about 10 minutes. So let me go adjust that a little bit, maybe do 10 to 12. And then we'll have a discussion about it when we get back. And last pieces that we want to talk about with reading comprehension side.
Oh, it's not recorded.
No.
So yeah, I was just thinking about that. I was thinking about though when I was teaching 2nd grade, like that whole like when they had to do a math piece and I wanted something written. I wanted a math statement with numbers. It was like old school Wassel, and we wanted it written. We wanted, Sarah, she's gone. In what were all the little pieces, and they could check off their little like tasks for their little mini rubric for themselves. And that's where as a parent, when having children, they're doing so much electronically and they're bringing their work home and it's on Canvas. And I kept asking, and she'd be like, well, I got, 85 out of 100 on it. And I was like, well, what would have gotten you to the 100? What were the elements? Do you have that rubric? Do you have the checklist? What miss? And so this last time she's running START, and it was I said, well, what did you miss? And she's like, I didn't put it in, I didn't have page numbers on the and I was like, what do you mean you didn't have page numbers on it? And I said, was it supposed to be an APA format? She's like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be an APA. And I was like, where is that? Where is that listed? Did they tell you that? So yeah, so I mean, getting everyone broken down into those little bits, the littler, the better. And then we scaffold.
I mean, when you're talking, I thought about there was it was a Hamlin Robinson webinar. I'm going to see if I can find, like, if they put their recordings up or not. They recently had a webinar by an OT, and it was called A Path to Independence, Guiding Children in Managing Time, Space, and Materials. And you'll thinking about Stephanie, you're nodding. Did you attend that too? No, but you're saying, yes, we need this. And so I'm looking to see if I can find like a recordings or anything of it. I'm trying to remember how to navigate their site. There's a learning center. There we go. Community events and rentals, perhaps, or let's see, their learning center speaker series. Here we go. And executive function. Let's see if they have, oh no, they just have the description of it. That's unfortunate. Oh, archive. Nope. I don't, let me try one more time. Nope, I don't see any materials for it. But anyway, Hamlin Robinson, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen and share the link to their free speaker series. But so people who know me know I take screenshots of everything. But one of the things, and she had some great materials, and hopefully maybe if we write to Hamlin Robinson, you could get some of those. But one of the things she talked about was picturing done. Instead of here are the steps along the way, what does done look like? And having your kids, because if you say, okay, talk me through the steps that you're going to take to get there. And so when you're talking it through it, you might even be imagining yourself in these steps. So instead of always a checklist might be too supportive, that I want them to talk it through. And that was really an interesting perspective too.
Just read the directions. I mean, goodness, I can't even, Miss, what do I do? And I'm like, what does it say to do? And then they read it, oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh, you know.
My mom's favorite saying was all else fails, read the directions. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, she baked a lot. And so she's like, and that was her point. She's like, you've got to read the directions, because you can't bake a cake and expect it to turn out without reading the directions.
And
like,
all of them, not
all the directions.
First step.
Thank you, Krista. See you later, Krista.
I did find one thing I'll share is let's, show me and tell me your plan. Take a picture of what done looks like. And so here's a middle schooler ready to go. This is what done looks like. Now, okay, now we need a plan to get there. Something else I really liked from her was, so instead of those checklists, what does done look like, that situation planning. The other piece, is your backpack. Think about their best friends. Like your computer needs its charger. Those are best friends. Your water bottle needs, so think about those pieces. What does done look like? The one thing else that I really like that she did was with a time, instead of saying the time timer, get a spare clock and write on it in dry erase marker. And so that you say, okay, right now it's 10 after 1. You have to leave at 1/4 after. Here's how much time you have left. And so instead of like a time timer, which goes the opposite way of time, this is on a real clock and they're watching it pass. And so I love, like, look at this one. Okay, you have to be ready for soccer, or here's, when you need to work on your method, here's your materials, here's your hypotheses, so you have this is the time you need to work on your science lab. So I thought that was just brilliant. She said, have two clocks, one for this and one for watching the time go by. I mean, look at that. I love that. Anyway.
I was just going to say, I love these little timers, these little things, because I have them for 5, 10, 1. So for chunking, I'll give kids these and say, okay, this is how long you have to do X for. Then you get this 1-minute break. And they literally have them in front of them. And it really helps them because then they aren't so overwhelmed by the whole task.
I appreciate that.
I think, go ahead, Alicia. I was just going to ask if anyone else wanted to share out.
So I think Alyssa and Stephanie weren't in the same room. Who else was in your room, Stephanie? You had John. And I think you had Abigail. I know Abigail has her hands full. I don't know if John wants to share this time or if you do.
I was gonna say, I think John should, okay? Because we
Oh,
did.
geez. Yeah, no, I mean, we mainly talked about how we give our students the choice, giving that freedom and individuality in things like projects and writings. I feel like that was the main way we were talking about. We're both resource room teachers, and so we were actually talking about as well of sometimes sometimes when we make the focus too broad and we try to incorporate too many themes or too many, like we try to use tech and we try to teach them about, like, if we incorporate too much, they get lost or they will kind of shut down or be like not, they won't be as engaged. So I feel like that got into us talking about, well, where do we incorporate the freedom of choice and allow our students to thrive. And we mainly talked about in writings, we both save prompts or arguments that students have had previous in the year, jokingly arguments, and we then say, okay, argue about it later, and in an actual logical CER writing prompt. Or for me, I do sort of more open-ended projects where I give them the tools and I give them kind of the prompt, I suppose, but I say you can make it any way you can. That's very basic, but that's essentially what I do. Is I give them the option to, well, you could write it, or you could make a PowerPoint, or you could make a video with your friends, or you could draw me a picture that has captions in it. So we mainly talked about that, as well as when sometimes it just doesn't work, is what we talked about. When sometimes even after sitting down with a student and breaking things down, a student might sometimes be like, I don't get it. So we kind of just went all over like that.
Well, and that connects to with Alyssa, you were talking about that independence. How do we help foster that? I mean, I see that as almost two parts of, the independence in the comprehension, but also the independence in the getting the knowledge off the words off the page. So, are we, which are they struggling in both or just the one? And especially that, okay, if we've got the knowledge, if we can pull it off the page and we struggle with understanding, that's a very different if we can get it off the page ourselves, or can't get it off the page, but if we talked about it, then they're with you. So what do we mean by independence? To me, that's a multifaceted concept too. Stephanie,
Yeah, and it also, oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Nina.
Alicia.
Oh, no, I saw Stephanie on mute. So after you're done, Nina.
No, I was just going to share that it also kind of helps support the students when it comes to productive struggle. So we're supporting students, acknowledging the fact that it's okay for me to not know the right way or to not have the right answer, but like this is a time to feel like it's safe and we're going to provide structures and scaffolds to help get through that. So it's also, as a student, building confidence. That was it.
Yeah,
Stephanie?
I totally agree. We were talking about that as well, about building an environment that is safe and they don't feel embarrassed, especially with middle schoolers. Oh my goodness, making mistakes, and letting them know it's okay. Or just sitting there in silence for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you mentioned the middle schoolers, it makes me think of a video by Rick Lavoie, who he did the movie Fat City, which is about a learning disability simulation. He also has How Difficult Can no, that's Fat City. Last One Picked, First One Picked on the Motivation Breakthrough. He has a lot of really great experiences from running a school for kids with learning disabilities. And I remember an example he said once that, Mom, you and your kids are at the mall and a bunch of your daughters, you're at the mall with a daughter and a bunch of her friends approach. The worst thing you could do is talk to her friends. The second worst thing you could do is not talk to her friends. In other words, you can't win. Their entire lives are to avoid embarrassment. And that's, their middle school is a very complex creature. And those of you who are teaching middle school, my hat's off to you. I did 1 year of that and then I went to high school. Effie, did you want to add something? You're muted. We can't hear you. We can see your mouth moving, but you gotta click the unmute.
No, just thinking about, yeah, some of the diverse needs of the kids and the different age groups there, and as we roll into the spring and things. So
Yes, spring is a tricky time, isn't it? Go ahead, Nina.
No, it just made me think about my 15-year-old son who doesn't want anything to do with me most of the time. But you know, he asked me to make him this or that, or heat him up something. And I said to him one time, I said, well, you can heat up your own pizza. And he's like, but I like it when you do it for me. And so it's that push and pull. Like, don't talk to me, leave me alone, but I need you. I want to feel supported by you. That kind of thing. So just like you said earlier, Stephanie, building an environment where they feel safe to then be like, go away.
I think that's a great segue within. Let's let everybody out early. So Nina, I'm going to pass it back to you for our last steps. I'll put the resource guide back in.
Okay, perfect. So we're just going to wrap up for today. As a reminder, we have 2 more sessions left. Both of them are going to be in May. We'll be looking at putting this all together and thinking about how fluency can help support our readers as they're going through the MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports. And then in 529, we'll be looking at tools and strategies for instructors to support all of this. I invite you guys to think about something that you saw or heard when we were going through our work today. And I'm going to go ahead and add this into the chat. There's a little exit slip for you. When thinking about some of the things that you saw, heard, or read, what did that make you think or wonder? And so now I would like to try. So just another great way to wrap up a lesson or a time together. And here's an example of some of the things that we have gone through. If you also want to look at the Jamboard, that has a lot of our resources that we went through today. So you can definitely lean in on any of those. Feel free to fill that in and add that to the chat, or just fill it out to yourself and just as a self-reflection. Go ahead, Alicia, did you want to share something from the
I was just
Jamboard?
going to make an opportunity for them to add that add that in here. So to
Perfect.
add in what you said. When I saw, heard, or read, it made me think, wonder, so now I want to. We'll give everyone a moment. So you can either add it to the Jamboard or the chat box. Thank you, Stephanie, for adding. Adding more modalities to explore and express students' mastery of skills. And because it's almost 5:30 and we did say we want to try and let you out early, let's just have a few last resources. I put the resource guide in for you. We would be remiss to not remind you of the asynchronous classes that are available. I'll put the link into that, as well as the synchronous classes. Oh, those are almost done. And what were you about to say, Effie?
oh, nothing. I just have a little friend down here like pawing at me to Give her a little attention. Not the
These-
choking
the-
dog.
The asynchronous ones are here, the synchronous ones are here. We'll put that into the chat box for you to spread. Someone else said, I heard UDL and Angela, thank you, got excited because our staff has been very engaged with UDL. Yes. Alyssa, habits of mind made me think about their relationship with math literacy. Oh, yes, lots of different kinds of things to engage with, and let's have lots of ways for them to show their work. So thank you all. We appreciate, so I'll go back to our thank you for your engagement slide. We appreciate all of you, and we look forward to seeing you in May.